Across the world, scattered across deserts, mountains, jungles, and ocean coasts, lie ruins and formations that should not exist. Towering megaliths, colossal walls, giant doorways, staircases built for strides twice the length of ours, salt formations that resemble muscle fiber on a scale no living animal could match. At the same time, nearly every ancient culture remembers the same haunting idea. There were giants on the earth in the distant past. Some say they were children of gods. Some call them titans, Nephilim, Asuras, or long-eared builders. Others insist they were simply the first people, taller, stronger, wiser, wiped out in a catastrophe that reset the world. Tonight we explore a provocative possibility that these legends, megaliths, oversized tools, and strange geological anomalies may be faint echoes of a real, forgotten population of giant beings. We cannot prove giants existed, but we can follow the clues they supposedly left behind. So sit back, get comfortable, and let the outside world fade. This is The Forgotten Giants: Legacy of the Titans. Our journey begins with perhaps the strangest claim of all, that some of the world's mountains, cliffs, and salt formations are not just rock, but the remains of titanic bodies turned to stone. In myth after myth, giants are not simply killed, they are petrified. In Greek legend, the blood of slain giants becomes rock, and defeated titans are imprisoned beneath mountains. In the Bible, entire cities and tribes are turned into pillars of salt for their wickedness. Among the Hopi and other native traditions, there are stories of giant beings frozen into the land itself, their forms buried in the hills. In the ancient Near East, some stories speak of the tall ones being turned to stone by divine fire from the sky. Of course, geology offers its own language for this: permineralization, organic tissue replaced by minerals over time. We see this in petrified forests, fossil bones, even small animals preserved in stone. But typical fossilization is slow and partial. A bone here, a fragment there. The legends, however, describe something else entirely: sudden, catastrophic petrification on a massive scale. Entire bodies, entire tribes, turned to salt, crystal, or stone in what sounds like a single cataclysmic moment. In certain places, the visual impression is unsettling. There are cliffs whose contours resemble reclining human figures, ridges shaped like enormous spines, rock faces that look startlingly like the profiles of slumped or sleeping giants. Most of this can be explained through pareidolia, our tendency to see familiar shapes in random patterns. But when ancient stories already insist giants were turned to stone here, and the land itself loosely resembles bodies, it's easy to see why people began to wonder, could there be a geological mechanism by which large organisms might petrify rapidly? Extraordinary volcanic events, mineral-saturated mud flows, high-energy electrical discharges, sudden burial under mineral-rich sediments, and rapid heating and cooling may, at least in theory, accelerate mineralization. We know from experiments that small objects can become heavily mineralized in years or decades, not always millions of years. Scale that up, include catastrophic conditions, and the line between myth and science becomes blurry. We are not saying mountains are literally giant corpses, but the deep resonance between stories of petrified giants and the eerie, almost anatomical look of some formations is hard to ignore. And nowhere is this more intriguing than in the world's highest mountain range. High in the Himalayas, a region older than empires, perhaps older than many of our myths, lies a geological puzzle that continues to fascinate both scientists and seekers of forbidden history. In parts of Tibet, Ladakh, and the surrounding ranges, enormous salt and mineral formations display layered, fibrous patterns that look disturbingly like muscle tissue. Long parallel bands, twisting, striated textures, cross-sections that, when seen in the right light, resemble the cross-cut of flesh on a scale that dwarfs the largest land animals. Geology explains this as the remains of ancient seabeds, squeezed, folded, and uplifted as tectonic plates collided. Over millions of years, sediments became rock. Former oceans became mountaintops. That is the standard story, yet local traditions in the region preserve a very different one. In Tibetan and Hindu lore, the Himalayas were once home to Asuras, powerful giant beings, and to other titanic races that warred with the gods. One set of stories says that after a cataclysmic battle between heaven and these giants, the bodies of the fallen were buried beneath rising mountains. Their flesh, it is said, hardened like crystal and turned to salt under the wrath of the gods. In Ladakh and parts of Nepal, some peaks have nicknames that translate roughly as Sleeping Titan or the Reclining God. Villagers point out ridge lines that resemble a vast shoulder, a bent knee, or a massive face staring at the sky. To outsiders, this is just poetic imagination. To those who grew up with these stories, the mountains are not just rock. They are graves. From a scientific perspective, the Himalayas do possess conditions that may, at least in principle, promote unusually rapid mineral transformations. Ancient oceanic deposits rich in salt and minerals. Extreme pressure and heat from plate collisions. Powerful groundwater movement. And a history of abrupt uplift and intense erosion. If a large organism were to be buried rapidly in such an environment, its organic structures could in theory be replaced by mineral deposits more quickly than in many other settings. Does that mean there are literal giant bodies in the Himalayas? Almost certainly not. But it is fascinating that this one region brings together rock and salt formations that look eerily organic. A geological context ideal for mineralization. And some of the world's oldest stories about titanic beings buried under mountains. The Himalayas stand as one of the clearest places where myth and geology overlap, blurring the line between the symbolic bones of the earth and the imagined bones of forgotten titans. From here, our trail leads from mountains and salt to the oldest written records of giants. Long before archaeology, one of the world's oldest surviving texts described a race unlike anything seen today. Genesis 6:4 states, "There were giants on the earth in those days, the mighty men of old, men of renown." The Hebrew word is Nephilim, often translated as the fallen or the overthrown. According to the text, they were born when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men. Later books expand this bleak cast of characters. Anakim, long-necked ones, so tall that Israelite spies said, "We were like grasshoppers in our own sight." Rephaim, a race of giant warriors scattered across Canaan. Amim, the terrifying ones. Zamzumim, a giant nation of great stature. Og of Bashan, whose bed was over 13 feet long. Goliath of Gath, the giant warrior whose height dwarfed ordinary soldiers. To the writers of the ancient world, these beings were not fairy tale monsters. They were enemies, neighbors, rulers, and threats. Their lands are carefully mapped. Their tribes are named. Their defeat is recorded in military detail. Interestingly, many of the regions associated with giants in the Bible, Bashan, Lebanon, parts of Syria and Israel, correspond to regions containing some of the world's oldest and strangest stone structures. The massive foundations of Baalbek in Lebanon, the basalt circles of Rujim el-Hiri on the Golan Heights, the dolmens and megaliths scattered across the Levant. The Bible is not alone in describing such beings. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Book of Enoch speak of giants with heights of 15 to 30 feet, born from unions between heavenly beings and humans. Phoenician sources mention early rulers of enormous stature. Egyptian traditions describe the Shemsu Hor, followers of Horus, sometimes depicted taller and more powerful than ordinary people. Different cultures, different languages. The same theme repeats. There was once a race of beings larger, stronger, and stranger than ordinary humans, and they were wiped out. If such a race existed, their presence would not only be recorded in texts, it would be carved in stone. The idea of giants is not confined to the Middle East. It is global. From Europe to Africa, the Americas to Oceania, Asia to the Pacific, cultures separated by oceans and millennia all describe a similar type of being. In Greece, the Titans and Gigantes war with the Olympian gods, only to be overthrown and buried under mountains. In Norse tradition, the Jötnar, giant beings, exist before the creation of the human world and linger as powerful forces of chaos at the edges of reality. In Ireland, the Fomorians are a race of giants driven out by heroic tribes. In India, the Mahabharata and Puranic texts speak of Rakshasas, Daityas, and Danavas, some of them enormous in size, engaged in wars involving terrifying weapons. Chinese legend remembers Pangu, the giant who forms the world from his own body, and other tall beings who shaped the land. In Africa, Zulu, Dogon, and other traditions describe ancient giant ancestors or powerful first people with extraordinary strength and knowledge. In the Pacific, Polynesian stories tell of tall, long-eared builders who came before. In the Americas, giant traditions are everywhere. The Paiutes speak of the Sitaka, red-haired giants driven into a cave and burned. The Iroquois remember pale-skinned giants who predated their tribes. The Maya described the Quinametsin, giant builders punished by the gods. Andean legends insist that some colossal stone structures in Peru were built by giants prior to the Inca. These stories differ in tone and detail. Some giants are noble, others monstrous, but they share core points. The giants lived in very ancient times. They were powerful, often technologically impressive. They either oppressed humanity or ruled it. They were ultimately removed, often by a flood, cosmic war, or divine punishment. If this is purely coincidence, it is a remarkable one. If it is not, then these global testimonies may be fragments of a much older, shared human memory. If giants once lived, we would expect to find not just stories in large buildings, but also tools and artifacts suited to their size. Across the world, archaeologists and locals alike have discovered objects that seem curiously oversized for human use. In various regions, enormous hammers and stone pounders have been unearthed, some weighing 40, 60, even 100 pounds. Too heavy to use effectively as hand tools for the average person, yet clearly shaped for gripping and impact. Wear marks show long use, not ceremonial display. In Peru, rounded knocking stones and giant pounders appear near quarries where multi-ton blocks were extracted. Trying to swing or raise these tools using ordinary human strength would be impractical. But for a physically much larger being, they could have been standard equipment. In Europe and Asia, oversized axes and war clubs have been found, their sockets large enough to hold massive wooden hafts. Some are dismissed as ritual pieces, yet bear scars from actual blows and repeated sharpening. In the Near East and Anatolia, large chisels and mysterious heavy copper or stone tools appear in contexts that suggests serious stoneworking rather than ceremony. Egypt hosts another puzzle: enormous stone vases, bowls, and sarcophagi carved from granite and diorite. Some so large and heavy that moving them today would be a major undertaking. Their volumes far exceed what would be convenient for everyday human use and seem more compatible with a culture comfortable handling great weights as a matter of routine. Not every large artifact belongs to a giant, of course. Some may be symbolic, some tied to animals or group tasks. But when we see enormous tools clustered around equally enormous construction, and local traditions that insist giants once lived there, a coherent picture begins to emerge. Someone or something on this planet once designed and used objects scaled far beyond our current norms. Architecture contains its own silent evidence of scale. If you walk through ruins around the world, a strange pattern emerges. Many ancient sites contain doorways so tall, steps so deep, ceilings so high that they feel almost hostile to the proportions of an ordinary human body. In Petra, Jordan, rock-cut facades tower over 40 meters high, with door openings far exceeding any practical need for human access. In Egypt, megalithic temples like the Valley Temple of Khafre feature huge blocks and massive entranceways that dwarf visitors, more reminiscent of an environment for giants than for people our size. In Peru, certain staircases at Ollantaytambo and Pisac have steps so tall and deep that humans must climb them with both feet and hands, as if walking up giant-sized risers. On Malta and in parts of the Mediterranean, ancient temple doorways rise far beyond human proportions, with hinge cutouts hinting at enormous stone or wooden doors that once swung there. On Easter Island, early stone foundations and house platforms have unusually high thresholds and expanded proportions, again matching local stories of an earlier, taller population. Could this simply be a stylistic choice? Powerful architecture designed to impress and intimidate? In some cases, perhaps. But in others, the ergonomics seem genuinely misaligned with human comfort and practical use, and much better suited to individuals of greater stature and strength. If a race of giants or large hominids once lived alongside smaller humans, these oversized architectural features would make perfect sense, and their disappearance, often linked to a great cataclysm, would leave behind exactly what we see now. Ruins too big for us, tools too heavy for us, stories that tell us these things were never truly ours. One theme ties nearly all these legends together: a great flood. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh describes a deluge that wiped out almost all life. The Bible tells of Noah's flood after the time when the Nephilim were on the earth. Hindu texts speak of cyclical floods that reset the world. Chinese myths describe devastating inundations that reshaped the land. Native American, Polynesian, Aboriginal Australian, and many other traditions remember waters that rose, swallowed coasts, and destroyed entire peoples. In many of these stories, the giants are specifically mentioned as perishing in that disaster. Modern geology confirms that between roughly 12,000 and 8,000 years ago, the Earth experienced rapid sea level rise as Ice Age glaciers melted. Coastlines moved inland for hundreds of kilometers in some regions. Entire continental shelves disappeared underwater. Some scientists propose comet or asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, abrupt climate shifts, and megafloods as triggers for these changes. If a specialized population of large-bodied hominids existed, adapted to certain coastal or fertile regions, they would have been exceptionally vulnerable to such upheavals. Large bodies require more food, more territory, more oxygen, and more stable environments. Rapid climate change and flooding would push them to the edge quickly. Smaller, more adaptable human populations might survive and spread into the newly empty world. The myths remember the giants' destruction as an act of divine judgment. Science would frame it as environmental collapse. Both agree on the result: the giant age ended. If giants once existed, where did they come from? Several possibilities have been proposed, ranging from strictly natural to highly speculative. 1. A robust hominid lineage. We already know of several human-like species that were stronger and bulkier than us: Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo heidelbergensis, and possibly others not yet identified. Some could have been significantly taller or more massive, especially in favorable climates. 2. Hybridization. Genetic studies show that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and that we carry DNA from at least one unknown archaic lineage. It is conceivable that some hybrid populations exhibited unusual size or strength, preserved in memory as giants. 3. Environmental gigantism. During colder periods with richer megafauna ecosystems, natural selection may have favored larger bodies in some populations. Higher atmospheric oxygen levels or different nutrient conditions could also have supported greater size. 4. A lost pre-flood civilization. This hypothesis suggests that a technologically advanced culture existed before the end of the Ice Age, and that its elite or ruling class were unusually tall, either due to genetics, selective breeding, or something more exotic. After a global cataclysm, their remnants became the source of giant legends worldwide. 5. Mythological or symbolic beings grounded in real encounters. Giants in stories may be exaggerated representations of encounters with unusually tall individuals, foreign invaders, or the memory of large hominids now extinct. None of these theories can be definitively proven, but they show that the concept of giants is not inherently incompatible with science. If anything, it may be an incomplete echo of a far more complex prehistoric reality in which multiple human-like species coexisted and interbred over long periods. If we set aside dogma for a moment, both religious and scientific, and simply listen to the convergence of myths, ruins, tools, bones, and geological evidence, a provocative picture emerges. It suggests that the world before the end of the last ice age was more complex than we once assumed. Multiple human-like populations, some possibly larger and stronger, could have lived simultaneously. A global catastrophe or series of catastrophes may have wiped out entire lineages, including those remembered as giants. Fragments of their stories survived through oral tradition and were later written into sacred texts and epic poems. Their constructions and tools, too large and too advanced for later cultures, were inherited, reused, and misattributed by the survivors. Today, most of what remains are megaliths whose builders we cannot name, salt and stone formations reminiscent of bodies, oversized tools that make little sense for ordinary humans, tales of long-lost titans who helped shape the early world and then vanished. Whether we interpret giants as literal beings, distorted memories of extinct hominids, or symbolic representatives of a lost golden age, their presence in our oldest stories is undeniable. They mark a missing chapter in our understanding of ourselves, a time when the boundaries between humans, gods, and monsters were not yet clearly drawn. We may never know for certain whether giants truly walked the earth as a distinct race, but by following the clues, the legends, the megaliths, the petrified formations, the strange tools, and the flood traditions, we are reminded of a simple truth. Our past is far stranger, deeper, and more mysterious than the tidy timelines we learn in school. There are civilizations we have barely discovered, species we have not yet named, stories carved in stone that we still do not understand. Perhaps the giants of myth were real beings. Perhaps they were distorted memories of ancient hominids. Perhaps they are metaphors for something we have lost, a sense of awe at the scale of creation and the knowledge that we are not the first intelligent beings to shape this world. Whatever the case, their legacy endures. In the mountains we climb, in the ruins we study, in the stories we tell. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the forgotten age of giants. If this exploration sparked questions or challenged assumptions, then it has done its job. Until next time, stay curious,